Hi everyone and welcome back to English with Yubin, and for today's video I have prepared a kind of reading exercise for you guys, and I know it's been a while, but it's because I had a previous video planned but that one ended up getting scrapped, so here we are now. And for today's video we are going to be reading the book Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I may be butchering that name, but moving swiftly on. This book actually used to be one of my favorites growing up, and I think it was recommended to me by a family friend from primary school. And the reason I chose this book is because not only is it quite a short book, but it's also an easy read, and I just thought it would be a good place to start for both beginners and intermediate learners. But besides that, it's also a very heartwarming and touching book, and I think everyone could benefit from reading it no matter what your age. So that's the reason I chose this book. And my original plan was to actually read it aloud to you guys and explain the words and phrases as they came up. But unfortunately, due to copyright reasons, that's not possible. Which is why I highly recommend you getting the book to read for yourself or the audiobook and listening to it, and then coming back to this video and going through the words and phrases that I have picked out as I read the first few chapters. So yeah, that's the plan for today. Just to give you a little bit of background on this book, tell you a little bit what it's about. Keep in mind, I read this book a very long time ago, so it's a little bit hazy, but basically it's about a little boy named August, and his nickname is Augie, and he has a cleft palate, so he has facial differences from other children, and it's about him entering a school for the first time in his life. Up to that point, he was homeschooled by his mum. But yeah, it's basically about his experience trying to make friends and basically navigating through his life as someone who doesn't quite look the same as other children. And it's a very heartwarming and touching book, and I think it kind of changes your perspective on life a little bit as well. So yeah. So I've gone ahead and read the first few chapters up to Christopher's house, and I've gone through and highlighted some of the words and phrases that I thought would be quite useful, or some things that you might not have heard before. So without further ado, let's get started. So before we begin, I'm going based on the assumption that you've already read the first 3 chapters of the book up to Christopher's house. If not, go back and read the first 3 chapters or listen to it on the audiobook and then come back. And let's start with the stuff that I've highlighted. So the first phrase that I've highlighted is "I'm kind of used to." This is a very common phrase, and I'm pretty sure you've heard it many times before, or you already know what it is. But just to be sure, "I'm kind of used to" basically means something happens to you so often or so regularly that it no longer affects you. So for example, my niece is here. 일어서세요. 안녕하세요. 안녕하세요. My niece barges in on me so often. But for example, I could say, my niece barges in on me so often that I am kind of used to it now. Are you gonna stay here for the entire recording? Okay. So yeah, that's "I'm kind of used to" in a sentence. Okay, you can stay there. The second thing that I have, just please don't knock over the camera, is all I'm asking. She's being escorted out. So the second thing that I've highlighted is "we've all gotten pretty good." Again, this is a very common English phrase that is used, and you've probably heard it said before, but it basically means that perhaps you weren't good at something to begin with, but over time, as you practiced it's gradually improved. So, for example, after practicing the piano for many hours a day, I've gotten pretty good at it. Next, we have I take that back or I take it back. And that means you're basically cancelling or nullifying what you've just previously said. Let's say, for example, I think it would be difficult to jump out of a plane to do skydiving. And then I say, actually, I take that back. It would be impossible for me because I have a fear of heights. So yeah, you're just basically saying, no, actually, that previous thing that I just said, I take that back. No longer. Actually, this is what I mean. And then we have, that's the way she is. I could also say, that's the way I am. That's the way they are. But that's just them as a person. They won't change. It's part of their personality, part of their mannerisms, and they probably won't change. So, for example, I'm a very introverted person, and that's just the way I am. My dad is a very extroverted person, and that's the way he is. We probably won't understand each other, but I accept that, and it's just the way we are. And then from the second chapter, why I didn't go to school, the first thing I highlighted was petrified. And although this is still quite a commonly used word, you might not have heard of it before because it has many synonyms, but it basically just means you're very scared. And another synonym you might have heard of before is terrified. But with petrified, it basically means you're so scared that you can't move, you turn to stone. So for example, I am absolutely petrified of heights, but also bugs. The only difference being that with heights, yes, I will freeze up like on a roller coaster and I will not move an inch. I won't even scream. I just stay still. With bugs, it's a very different story. If a bug lands on me, dear Lord, Jesus, take the wheel, because you do not want to be anywhere near me if a bug lands on me. My two and only reactions are either to fall to the ground hysterically crying or run around like a headless chicken screaming my head off. And those are my two and only reactions to if a bug lands on me, and that's what happens when I'm petrified. And the second thing that I've highlighted is isn't so hot. And no, I am not talking about the weather, but obviously context is important. If your conversation is indeed about the weather, then yes, clearly you are talking about the temperature, but not in this case, because here isn't so hot basically means not so good, because here Augie is talking about his mum being a child's illustrator and how she's good at drawing fairies and mermaids, but not so good at the boy stuff. So I'm assuming like cars and rockets, and that's why Augie says the boy stuff isn't so hot. It basically means the boy stuff isn't as good. You can also use this phrase to talk about how you're feeling. So if someone asks you, oh, how are you? Or how are you feeling? You could respond with, I'm not feeling so hot. Then that basically means you're not feeling too good. You're not feeling too well. So yeah, that's the phrase isn't so hot. And then we have playdates, which is quite self-explanatory, but clearly you do not have playdates from the time, I would say, when you're a teenager. You just say, I'm going over to so-and-so's house, or I'm going to go hang out with this person. So it's mostly reserved for children, but it's when the parents get together and they organize days or dates for their kids to just hang out and have fun together, and that's what you call a playdate. And then we have the phrase bump into each other. Now, most of the time when you say I bumped into someone, it doesn't mean you physically went shoulder to shoulder with them. It just means you happened to see them in the street or in a shop, but it happened unexpectedly. So yeah, spontaneously, you just saw them. You might talk to them, but that's what bumping into each other means. So for example, I bumped into my friend on my way to the park and we had a nice conversation. But obviously, if you physically bump into someone, you say, oh, sorry, I bumped into you, and then you go your separate ways. And then we have I'm making too big a deal, and that's when you're taking something that's quite small and you're making it into something big. And I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally and up in your head. So for example, let's say someone walking by said, I don't like your jeans. And then I get home and that comment stays with me throughout the day. And I say, oh, this person said she doesn't like my jeans. She must hate me. And my sister comes along and she says, oh, you're just making too big a deal out of it. It basically means that something quite small makes me very upset. So yeah, that's what it means to make a big deal out of it. So the overall meaning of the phrase to make a big deal out of something is to treat something, which could be a problem, it could be a comment, and to treat it like it is more important than it actually is in reality, and that's what it means. Okay, the third and final chapter for today, How I Came to Life. That's the name of the chapter, by the way, and not how I came to life. But the first thing I highlighted was cracking up. This is a phrase I use very, very often on a regular basis. I probably use it at least 5 times a day, and it just means to start laughing. If you say something even remotely funny, I will start cracking up and laugh hysterically until my stomach hurts. And yeah, that's just what cracking up means. And then we have the phrase, a walk in the park. And this is one of those classic English idioms that comes up pretty often in everyday conversation. And it's referring to something that's easy, easy breezy, easy peasy lemon squeezy. But yeah, something very easy to do, like a walk in the park. And another classic English idiom that you've probably heard quite often is you hit the nail on the head. And that just means, yep, you've got it. You've pinpointed the key idea. So yeah, basically you did something or you said something exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. So yeah, okay, we're nearing the end now. On duty, so that's the person in charge, the one who's responsible. So if I was on Mina duty, then I am responsible for her, for looking after her, and that's what on duty means. The next phrase we have is to get stuck with. So you could be stuck with work or a person, but regardless, it means you have to deal with that because you have no choice or because no one else wanted to. So I'll give you 2 examples. I could call up my sister and say, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm going to be late for dinner because I'm stuck with work. So in that case, it's not like I can say to my boss, nah, sorry, I'm not going to do this piece of work because I'd like to go home. I have to do the work, otherwise I'll be fired. So that's why I'll be stuck with work, because you can't not do it, right? The second example you could have is, on the whole entire coach journey, I was stuck with this really annoying person who sat right next to me and was really loud. So yeah, it just means for the whole entire coach journey, I was unable to avoid this person because they sat next to me and I had to listen to their loudness for the whole entire journey. So I was stuck with them. Moving on to hysterical. This is just uncontrolled emotion. It could be good, it could be bad, but personally, I feel like there's a bad connotation attached to hysteria that might just be my own personal feeling. But either way, you could be hysterically crying, which is crying uncontrollably, or hysterically laughing uncontrollably. But regardless, it just means uncontrolled emotion. Turned out to be. So this is when you're referring to something that you thought was one thing, but actually it was something else. So for example, let's say I took a sip out of a cup which I thought had water in it, but it turned out to be alcohol. So something you thought was one thing, but actually was something else entirely. And that's how you use the phrase, it turned out to be. Okay, and lastly we have mushed up, and if you look up an image of mushy peas, which is a classic English food side, you'll kind of get an idea of what mushed up is. It just basically means squashed, scrambled, call it what you will, but yeah, just unrecognizable kind of. But in this context, Augie is actually talking about how his own face is mushed up, so you can kind of get an image of how truly different he looks from all the other children at his school. But yeah, those were some of the words and phrases that I had highlighted in the first 3 chapters of the book Wonder, and obviously this will be an ongoing series, so I hope you look forward to them. But yeah, that's it for today, and I will be back again next week with a different video. Might be continuing reading Wonder, it might be a different article, or it might just be talking about conversation topics. But anyway, I'm gonna stop the video here. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I will see you guys all again very soon. Bye!